Hi everyone, thank you very much for joining me today. I'm Elizabeth McNamara and I'm the registered dietitian here at the Forest at Duke. So I wanted to put together this presentation for you because recently I've been getting a lot of questions about what healthy foods are available here at the Forest and how to pick and choose foods from what we have offered to make meals that are appropriate for somebody both with diabetes and or with somebody who is monitoring their sodium content of their food. So I did my best to address some of those questions and give you examples of ways to put together healthy meals using the foods that we have offered here at the Forest. So before I jump into exactly what we offer here at the Forest and how it fits into your meal plan, I wanted to go over the basics of meal plans for somebody with diabetes and for somebody who is watching the sodium content of their food. So the plate method, which is not going to be news to you if you have seen any of my previous presentations, is the backbone of both of these diets or eating plans. And it starts with half a plate of fruits and vegetables, a quarter of a plate of intact grains or whole grains, and also in this category are going to be either starchy vegetables or healthy starches. And the final category is healthy proteins, which is foods such as meat, fish, nuts, or eggs. Now, the common questions that I get about these categories are, if I have diabetes, can I still eat fruit? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. If you are having a lot of trouble managing your blood sugars and you are confident that there are no other areas where you could make improvements in your diet, for example, you are having juice, desserts, or snacks like crackers or chips, then you can think about switching out fruits for non-starchy vegetables. But generally, fruits are fine, regardless of whether or not you have diabetes. The second question that I get is, where does bread fit into this plate method? And the answer is it falls in the whole grain category. But all of these categories have foods that are, some foods that are okay, and then they have foods that are definitely healthier and better choices. So bread is going to fall into the grain category, and whole wheat bread would be an okay to a good choice, whereas something like corn, beans, sweet potato, those are intact foods that have been minimally processed. So those are going to be in the better and best categories. Another question that I get is, that beans are not a grain. So would you categorize it in the grain or the protein category? And the answer to that question is that there are quite a few number of foods that don't fit perfectly into one of these categories. They're kind of a mixture of the two. And beans are a high protein, relatively high protein carbohydrate, but they are not technically a grain. So because they're so nutritionally similar to some of the starchy vegetables that you would find in the whole grain category, you could put it into either one of those categories, whichever one you need to sort of fill in the gap for that meal. So not every meal that is offered at the Forest at Duke is going to have everything that you necessarily need to make your optimal, healthy, balanced meal. So what I'm suggesting is that you have a few ingredients on hand to fill in any of the gaps that might exist so that you can make your plate method plate using foods that you like. So you're going to want to have some kind of whole grain or bean ready to go at home, some leafy greens or whatever your favorite vegetable is, frozen is fine. And then whatever your favorite fruit is, just in case the fruits and the vegetables provided is something that you either don't like due to your personal preference or is simply not enough to fill up half the plate. So I wanted to address a little more specifically people with diabetes or who are trying to prevent diabetes who had the question of how many carbohydrates am I supposed to eat each day? And the answer to that is simply there is no set number. As long as half of your plate is fruits and vegetables, and the other half, including the proteins and the grains, are as intact or minimally processed as possible, whether you have more meat and fewer grains, or primarily grains and almost no meat or no meat at all, as long as what you are eating is intact and minimally processed, there are no guidelines on what is better or worse with regard to the exact number of carbohydrates. So just to reiterate, the most important thing is that the grains you are choosing are minimally processed. So the sodium guidelines are a little more straightforward. The American Heart Association states quite clearly that between 1,500 milligrams and 2,300 milligrams per day is ideal for somebody with hypertension trying to prevent any worsening of the disease, or somebody who is trying to prevent chronic diseases. And the Diabetes Standards of Care gives a similar amount of 2,300 milligrams per day. However, this is really difficult because most Americans consume 4,000 milligrams or more of sodium per day. And becoming accustomed to foods with less salt can be really difficult because salt alters the taste so much. So these are the guidelines, and it translates to somewhere between 500 and 800 milligrams of sodium per meal. So if you count up the amount of sodium you have in your meals for, say, a couple days, it can give you an idea of where you are in that ballpark. So as you can see here on slides 6 and 7, the weekly menu, and highlighted in pink is a balanced meal. So if you add up the sodium content of the foods that are highlighted with any modifications that are noted either highlighted in pink or under the dietitian tips below, the sodium content will fit into the 1,500 to 2,300 milligrams per day. You'll hit the 1,500 milligram sodium content per day if you eat a very low sodium breakfast, and if you have a breakfast of around 400 to 600 milligrams of sodium, you're going to be looking at meeting the higher end, like 2,300 milligrams per day. So these are the examples on slide 7 of the dinner menus that we have, and more examples of balanced meals, same as before. You'll notice that on Sunday, we don't have a dinner served at in the cafe. So what I recommend is ordering a meal from Greenwood's Cafe, where everything is customizable. So if you didn't already know this, everything that is available on the Greenwood's menu can be added to something else on their menu. So for example, if you would like the Mediterranean rice bowl, but you don't want all that rice in there, and you would like it served on a bed of greens instead of rice, you can make that substitution. So as long as the ingredient is available somewhere on that menu, you can move it to any food item that you would like. This entire presentation is also going to be available in PowerPoint form without my face covering up part of the slide. So if you wanted to take a closer look at these menus, they'll be available on the Forest at Duke portal. So the first thing I wanted you to know about slides 6 and 7 is that salad dressing is not included in the nutrition totals. And if you have paid attention to salt content before, you'll know that salad dressings that are store-bought are generally loaded with salt. So based on your personal goals, if you're trying to meet the lower end of the range, you could consider adding olive oil and vinegar, or olive oil and lemon, and then using black pepper and herbs to add flavor to your salad instead of a typical store-bought dressing. The other thing I wanted to mention is that people who are different sizes need very different amounts of food. So a 6'2" man and a 5' woman are not going to need the same number of calories per day. So when you are thinking about how much food you're going to put on your plate, you want to put you want to keep the proportions the same. So you want to have your half a plate of vegetables, your serving of high protein foods, and your grains in the correct proportions. And then if you are somebody who simply does not need as many calories as somebody else, you want to decrease the entire amount of food in proportion. So you don't want to just eliminate the vegetables because then your meal is not going to be balanced anymore. So on this slide, I wanted to address some of the common concerns and questions that I often get. The first one is that there is a low sodium meal or two available on the menu every day, but you might not like that particular meal. And that is completely normal. We are feeding a lot of people here, and it's completely reasonable that not everybody has the same preferences and tastes. So I would suggest that you find a few meals at Greenwoods that are to your taste and your health preferences, customized any way that you want, so that if there's a day that due to your preference you don't like the low salt meal that's chosen, you have a couple other go-to options that you can utilize. The second concern is that some of the ingredients that we use are so high in salt that if we used lower salt ingredients, it would make it easier for people to choose low salt foods. So the answer to that is there is no low salt option for some of the very popular foods that we do serve. And what I recommend is that whenever possible, remove those high salt items and you can make an entree that is typically high in salt much lower. So if you take out any kind of a cured meat, if you reduce the amount of deli meat that's in a sandwich, or you ask for the sauce on the side or omit the sauce altogether, many high salt items are going to become a much lower sodium food item. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it and found this presentation helpful. I'm available in person by appointment as well as by phone or email, and I'm happy to discuss anything with you and answer any questions you might have.